Psychologists that work on post-traumatic growth are consistently finding that agency is one of those factors that contributes to the ability to make positive change in the wake of suffering. That our sense of agency, keeping that intact through a process of suffering, through a process of pain or injustice or oppression, is deeply connected to our ability to make sense of and find meaning in and be able to kind of grow more resilient or stronger through that suffering. I wonder if you might comment on a kind of like this, from a theological perspective, the kind of psychic nature of losing agency, kind of undergoing suffering in a way that kind of strips us of our control, strips us of our ability to make an impact. Because this is, I think, now we're talking about suffering at the most dire level.
Yeah, yeah. And I think most of the, especially for us moderns, because we tend to read ourselves and understand ourselves implicitly as kind of sovereign individuals, owners of ourselves and our actions, that kind of sense of individual sovereignty is deeply felt, not just theorized, but deeply felt understanding of the self.
I'm the captain.
And if you lose, one of the most difficult aspects of suffering is kind of the loss of the ability to control the environment, kind of letting go. And the self what's so troubling about suffering often is that you end up with a self that, as you say, often is able to exert some agency, but that agency is a kind of curtailed. And often if you can't quite exert agency that you think you want to exert, you perceive yourself as not exerting agency. And there's a kind of a loss of ability to kind of relate and be, in certain sense, in charge on account of false expectation of what it might need. It might need to be the case for me to be in charge. But one of the things that I find puzzling about suffering, and I'm not sure exactly that I know how to clearly think about it, but it seems to me intuitively and theologically right that one of the possible sources of growth from suffering concerns precisely the loss also of certain sense of agency and certain sense of who I am, and investment in who I am. It's only when I kind of let go of that, and
losing yourself,
when I lose myself, right? That self is always constructed, right? But when I lose my constructed self, when suffering contributes to losing my constructed self, sometimes often falsely constructed self, the possibilities open up.
There's this kind of
for transformation.
They're saying goodbye to the false self, the false notions that are kind of setting ourselves up, perhaps in a kind of idolatry, a sense of control that too closely approximates the kind of control that only God has. And then kind of that stripping away, you said that leads to a transformation.
It could lead.
It can.
That's right.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right? But it can, especially if one doesn't. If one thinks of the work of breaking down as simply a kind of a negative work, as a kind of demolition work of somebody who is my enemy and doesn't want the integrity of me to be there, whether that's an actual enemy or a kind of symbolic kind of enemy, then it becomes more difficult to kind of put yourself in a sense together if it's merely demolition. But if you can perceive how through all these, what might be possibly able to emerge through demolitions. I think that's also partly the agency, so that the kind of sense of the positive, notwithstanding the demolition work, remains, right? And I think you earlier spoke about the sense of agency of the self, that this conditional possibility of resilience throughout suffering, and I think some of that may be in that. And obviously, if you if you feel that you're in the suffering protected,
Yeah.
if you feel that in the midst of your suffering, how difficult it is, you cannot be at the most fundamental level undone, right? That creates the possibility to always expect and hope for something new.